Over the past decade, the Philippines has increasingly reoriented its national security doctrine. After spending almost half a century dealing with domestic insurgency and all sorts of challenges at home, the Philippines right now is paying more and more attention to external challenges. From the Aquino to the Duterte and now the Marcos Jr. administration, we're rapidly developing our minimum deterrence capabilities, we're improving our Philippine Navy, we're improving our Air Force, we're reorienting ourselves towards challenges in the West Philippine Sea, in the Philippine Sea, and we're trying to develop a 360 degrees maritime domain awareness capabilities. Nevertheless, we still have many challenges at home and on the domestic front. There are of course concerns about destabilization plots, nefarious chattering by supposed or allegedly former military officials and soldiers. Not to mention the domestic communist insurgency, which is still there, and of course, the future of Bangsamoro. In order to understand how the Marcos Jr. administration is dealing with these multifarious domestic challenges, we have someone who understands these issues very closely. Here with us again tonight is National Security Council spokesperson and Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya. Good evening again, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes. Let's talk about this. So,
very interesting topic last time.
I know. I mean, the previous topic was as exciting as it was. I think this is going to be even more interesting, right? For better or for worse.
Really?
Let's talk about this. Okay. So, first of all, there were discussions about destabilization plots or something like that. All the Chief of Staff General Bronner, said that he was misquoted. I think even
NSA.
Secretary Anyo also said something like, So what's the score there? Because I'm a little bit confused. Because we watched the speech of General Bronner. It's out there. So what's the misunderstanding there? What's going on here?
Well, we came to his defense. What we essentially said was that he was taken out of context. No.
And what's the context?
I think what he wanted, I'm not his spokesperson, but I'll try. I think what he wanted to say was there are some gripes or complaints from people, especially from retired and former military officers. And I think that's...
these are outside service
outside
people.
service.
Okay.
And Richard, if you know the military establishment, the retired people, they have a lot of ideas,
Yeah, I have a lot of military family members. Yeah,
Yeah, because, some are politically motivated. They come from different administrations. They were promoted under different administrations, and they have a lot of time on their hands, because they're retired, and some of them are relatively young because they retire at 56, 57.
Yeah, that's young. Yeah,
yes.
You can still marathon and all at that stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think General Bronner just used the wrong word. He used the word destabilization. I don't think that was his intention. He was talking to, during the West Mincom, I think, change of command ceremony. And I think he thought there was no media. So, he was speaking like a father to his children. The military, he was talking to the men, talk to men. That's a tradition in the military. Among the brothers.
Yeah.
And supposedly during that time, Chatham House rules apply. But unfortunately, there was media coverage, and what he said was taken out of context. No?
I see. Thank you for that. Because, if you watch it, then we say, what's the problem here? I can see what is... So I understand now what you're saying. Now, having said that, though, it's not like the Philippines hasn't had history of coup d'etats, right? To be honest about it. I mean,
exactly.
I think by some counts, 11 under Corazon Aquino alone, right? If you count even the one in Mindanao, which some scholars do not count for some reason. And then under Arroyo, you had multiple ones. Both Marcos and Estrada's downfall had to do something with the role of the military.
Yeah. But, Richard, when you talk to the active military officers, including Secretary Anyo, that's the recent retired people, they were part of the destabilization attempts also when they were young. They were lieutenants. When you're a lieutenant, you follow the order of the general, the colonel, and the captain, And they have no appetite for... People have no appetite. Our military has no appetite for destabilization or for what has been called as military adventurism. I think the lessons have been learned. And I think we are at a stage in our political life, in the history of the Philippines, that the military does not want to get involved. That's my own personal take. Because I've talked to several people as well. To be perfectly
Your
honest,
colleagues are all ex-generals.
yes, and to be perfectly honest, the gripes, the complaints are spirited, but they're not coming from the active service.
That's a good distinction.
They're coming from the retired,
Right.
who when you're retired, you're essentially a civilian, and therefore you have freedom of speech.
And you have a lot of opinion.
You have a lot of opinion.
Exactly.
And I think, that was fueled, that was seeded into the current political problems that we're facing as a nation. That's why when the when the chief of staff himself spoke about the destabilization effort, that was his words, effort.
Yeah.
It, struck a raw nerve, and everybody was talking about it.
Yeah, you're right. Perhaps the phraseology could have been kind of more massaged. No, it's like some chattering, discontent there.
Yeah,
or
I think
something.
the wrong words were used.
Yeah. So I understand. Now, speaking of that, I mean, it's not like in recent memory we haven't had some concerns about civil-military relations. So we had the reshuffle earlier this year, February, if I'm not mistaken, right? When you had the resignation of former National Security Council head, but more important, also the former defense secretary, interim defense secretary, first interim defense secretary, and then you had the reshuffle also in the leadership of the AFP. Now, what was the score there? I mean, was that kind of because the concern was that reshuffling perhaps is a corrective measure, because I talked to some very senior people in the military and they're saying, no, there was a little bit of problems with some appointments, we're fixing it. But we know in the military, once you do a kind of a reshuffle, it affects everyone down the road, right? So,
Richard,
what's going on there? Yeah.
No, I wasn't yet part of the National Security Council at that time.
Right.
So what I know was second-hand information. As you said, they're trying to fix
corrective
because there were some decisions that had to be addressed, had to be corrected. So I really I'm not familiar with the decisions that were made and the what happened during that time.
But of course, once you guys, your team took over the National Security Council, don't you feel that there's a problem there, or that there's something?
It's been corrected.
Okay.
It's been corrected.
So dust settled.
Yeah, the dust settled, and now that NSA is here, he's able to give the correct advice to the president. Because, Secretary Anyo has been in his position, has been part of the military establishment for a very long time. So he practically knows everyone.
Right. It's a lifetime.
Everyone.
It's a barangay in a way.
Yes. The military,
Yeah,
they are essentially a small group and everybody
Right.
knows everybody.
Yeah.
So he's able to give the president good advice, in the same way that he did also that when he was the ILG secretary.
Yes.
He would give advice to the president on who to promote to be chief PNP and regional directors of the Philippine National Police. He's doing that now for the military.
And last on this, I mean, I hope I'm not putting you too much under pressure. Again, I think DND secretary can also give his own version explanation of this. But just last question. So you kind of clarified that these rumblings and chatterings of potential discontent are by they're no longer in service, right? These are retired people.
And it's too early in the administration to be talking about that.
And it's a very popular administration
Yes.
still. 60% is a dream number for Biden or a lot of leaders around the world. But
That's right.
As much as, it could be improved, obviously, for many reasons. But pension reform is a serious issue that everyone's talking about now. I mean, is there any concern? Isn't there any concern in National Security Council that as we push with pension reform, if ever we push, that could create discontent among the serving military officials?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I have not been monitoring that issue,
I'm just saying, it's a National Security Council. I know I can ask Secretary Jokna about this or Secretary Chudor about this, but I just felt this is a national security issue too, right?
And it's
It's
important.
important. Exactly,
It's important. And if I heard the National Security Advisor correctly, his position was that the reform should apply to those who have yet to retire or who are not yet in active service,
so it's
or those that
it's a targeted sectional.
Yes.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, because I think Secretary Chudor also has another counter proposal or something like that. Because the proposal I'm talking about is the Finance Secretary Jokno's proposal that mentioned was that, which is much more comprehensive pension reform.
We support the position of Secretary Chudor. I think Secretary Chudor's position has been well thought of. It considers the what it's essentially the position of the DND and Secretary Chodoro is that the military should be considered as a separate entity to the rest of the uniformed services. No, because number one, number one, the military is more or less fixed in number as opposed to the PNP. The PNP has to increase in number every time the population changes.
Right.
Because there is a ratio that has to be followed, while the military, on the other hand, is fixed. No.
Interesting.
And number two, the nature of the work of the military is significantly different from that of the PNP. Because when you talk about pension reform, you're not just talking about military pension reform.
Yes.
You're talking about all the uniformed services.
Correct.
You're
So police din.
Police.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's right. And the appeal of Secretary Chodoro to Congress is to consider the military different from the other services because their role is really, they're really putting their lives on the line.
Guardians of the state.
Every day.
Yeah. So because of the exceptional nature of their work, there has to be kind of a more calibrated approach.
Exactly.
It cannot be just a question of money and cutting costs.
Exactly. Treat them differently, as you said, the exceptional nature of the work.
Yeah, in accordance, not because they're special in the sense that, we want to give them,
special
too much
treatment.
privilege, right?
Yes.
Special, but because the nature of their work is existentially important. One reason that, I always look forward to talking to people like you is that you're among the first quite vocal, high-level officials in this administration, who also served in the previous administration, who has, articulated something that we outside the government have been warning about for quite some time, which is this is malign interference operations or sharp power operations.
That's right.
And the reason I know about this is because I used to be based in Taiwan, and before that, I was a lot of times in Australia.
Yes.
So in fact, just the other month when I was in Taipei, I was talking to some people who are advising the current administration and likely the next president of Taiwan, and I was telling them about their, influence, laws, right? Anti-influence laws, right?
We don't have
interference, right?
Yes.
And they were telling me that actually Australia is the gold standard. That they also learned from Australia in 2017, right?
Yes.
So, what's the score there? I mean, first of all, what compelled you, or why did you feel that you have to come and call this out? Because this is something that has been happening for years, to be honest, including when you were there in the previous administration.
Richard, I wouldn't, if I was given a choice, I would not have talked about it.
Exactly.
I was just interviewed on the radio, and I didn't know that. I'm always telling Weng Salvacion and her on DCBB, because after that interview on the radio, it became headline in the Inquirer.
By newspaper,
by the Inquirer. So I was surprised, that people were actually listening, because the reason why I raised that, the reason why I raised the alarm was because I saw a common tactic in the Philippines that is being used by China, which is yung pagsasabungin, to create internal discord. So essentially what I was saying in that interview was, let's not fall into the Chinese trap, because when China said that there was this so-called promise to remove BRP, Sierra Madre, it created such a massive controversy that people were already pointing to each other.
Yeah, pitting different folks, even senators against each other because they're fathers and they're, exactly.
Exactly. So I said, there's something wrong here. And that's when we in the National Security Council, but let me not talk about NSC. That's when because I'm sure some people there already know about this. That's when I saw that there's something wrong. And that the Chinese narrative is really creating discord within the Philippine public in an effort to weaken our position in the West Philippine Sea. That's why I raised that point.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I understand you're saying like you kind of stumbled into the ring, right? It's I was just talking, next thing I know, I'm here in the ring. But in fairness naman, pinanindigan mo, I mean, you have been consistent. For me, I just saw a consistency between the transparency initiative we have in the West Philippine Sea. So parang, if you're going to have transparency about what China is doing in the West Philippine Sea, why not have exactly. So for me, my understanding is that this was a kind of a systematic transparency approach.
But Richard, you've been in this arena far longer than me. Remember, I was DILG, which is interior.
Exactly. Very
My
different.
kind of influence operations was, focused on internal issues like the NPA and the BIFF and the Abu Sayyaf. I was really not exposed to the international sphere. You have been for so long. So it's something that is well within your, expertise. For me, it was different. And I, as you said, somewhat stumbled into it. But I seem to have steered a hornet's nest because there's a lot of discontent.
Speaking of that, I think this is the destabilization we want to talk about. So hindi lang pala mga retired generals ang marami masabi. We also have a lot of retired academics or pseudo-academics having a lot to say and having forum here and there.
And who are accusing me of conducting a witchcraft. Oh, sorry, witch hunt. Witch hunt, and supposedly I have a list, a watch list of people that we at the NSC are watching, and this has.
I hope I'm not there on that list after everything I said before.
Which they say and claim has a chilling effect on their right of expression.
Oh, I feel bad for. So wait, these are people who suddenly believe in democracy and freedom. It's like after praising a communist regime.
I know. When I first heard about it, I said, it's a war of ideas. I understand that. And they have every right to say what they want.
Yes.
My issue with them is not that they're pro-China. And I want to make that perfectly clear.
It's your right.
I'm sure
you want to be.
I'm sure you guys are watching tonight.
Definitely.
It's not because my issue and my beef with you is not because you're pro-China. Okay? You have every right as a Filipino to express your opinion about it.
Wait, are you saying it's okay to be pro-China?
No. Well,
you're entitled to your opinion. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. What I'm saying is, our issue with them is the fake news and disinformation that they are sowing in the country, which is really part of the Chinese playbook. That's really my issue. Because once China says that, it was the Unaisame 1 or 2 that really bumped into the Chinese Coast Guard vessel, and they have videos to show it, then you will hear this pro-China group repeating that kind of narrative and showing the very video that the Chinese Coast Guard took and the Chinese Foreign Ministry released. So that's really my beef. I have no problem with your opinions. Go ahead.
Marketplace of ideas.
Marketplace.
Except, the market will have a problem. It's like fake products. You're bringing in and ruining the whole market, right?
Oh, I mean, well, maybe you have an issue against them.
No, I mean,
but mine is simply that, if you are not involved in fake news or disinformation, we have no problems with you. And we have no intent whatsoever to stop you from saying anything you want. That's why sometimes we wonder, did I threaten them? Did I say anything that would threaten them? I didn't say anything.
But Undersecretary Usec Jonathan, what are we looking at here? Because some are, there's like the hardline version of dealing with this, and then there's a more, I would say, softer version. The hardline version is we are tiptoeing towards classifying certain activities as treasonous, right? The more soft version is we just need transparency. If you are a foreign agent, just register accordingly because that's normal in other countries.
That's right.
For instance, you're doing advertisement for Denmark's renewables, right? Let's say you're working with the Danish government, you register that you're agent, let's say for the government of Denmark, for instance, right? So it doesn't have to sound like, like a nefarious James Bondish. No, if you're working for other countries for commercial diplomacy, you register. Like for Japan, let's say. That's a common practice in a lot of established democracies. So the softer version of a new Foreign Influence Act could be, wag kayong magpanggap na you're there as independent experts because you're not. You are a foreign agent. And just be honest about it. And then it's okay. We're not going to criminalize it. And then, of course, some are saying, no, this is something else. These guys are here to undermine the foundations of our democracy. For me naman, looking at the surveys, I'm quite confident. Their fake news is not that effective, right? Maybe 3%, right? But 90% of Filipinos know what's going on, right?
But
so how is this?
But Richard, it's true. It's true that many of their narratives have not created traction. But some, in a way, have created traction. For example, let me give an example.
They can be damaging. That's what you're saying.
Yes, they can be damaging. For example, the narrative that the Philippines is being used by the United States to contain China. That this is a great power rivalry between the US and China, and that the Philippines is putting itself in the middle, and therefore, because of that, we're technically cannon fodder. No, we're puppets of the United States. And let me just clarify that we're not entering into these arrangements with the U.S. With closed eyes. We know, how the United States operates. The U.S. operates on the basis of its own national interest. The Philippines also operates on its own national interest. It just so happened that the two aligned and the two intersected. And who are we to refuse help from the United States? The Chinese position, on the other hand, is totally foreign because they want the entire South China Sea to them. What we're just asking for, what we are asserting, is our 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, which is the West Philippine Sea.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any, there's any basis for the claim.
So it's gaslighting again.
It is gaslighting.
Gaslighting the Philippines for standing for its own sovereign rights.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's not like we're asking help from US so that we help them against, China for Taiwan, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not excited about that. Just look at the statements of the president, right? As we discussed in the previous episode. The reality is that if we leave it to the Philippines to deal on it alone with China, good luck sa atin. The asymmetry is just too much.
And that's what China wants, a bilateral approach.
Which they completely dominate.
Which it completely dominates. And us, since we are a middle power and a small country in the greater scheme of things, we need our traditional alliances, partners and friends, and the support of the international community. And of course, international law. So that, we can have a rules-based order in our part of the world.
And as we mentioned in the previous episode, we are not here to give Americans bases like before, which in a way created extraterritoriality, right? And really undermined our sovereignty. I would make that argument. I mean, it could sound leftist to you, but having foreign bases has its implication for your national sovereignty, right?
That's right.
But that's not what we're looking for. That's precisely why we have a de ETCA rather than return to what we have. That's precisely why I don't know why some senators say they have to pay rents. Well, the moment they pay rents, then we're back to what it was. Like, are you even thinking about what you're saying here? Once you pay rents for de ETCA, then ibang usapan na yan. Talagang military base na yan, diba?
That's right.
So, anyway, going back to this, so in your opinion, I mean, are you going to leave this to the Philippine legislature? Because it looks like there are conversations already in the Philippine Congress on dealing with this foreign influence, malign influence interference situation.
We hope to be able to present something, or we hope to be able to produce a draft very soon and submit it to a champion, someone who has taken a stand on the West Philippine Sea, to champion it in Congress. Because I think this is one of those things that we need. Similarly to other countries like Australia, Taiwan, where they have this. This is, I think, a gap that we need to fill up very soon.
And these are robust, mature democracies. I think no one in his right mind will say, in Taiwan and Australia. I mean, again, it's gaslighting to call it witch hunting when you're actually just cleaning the house, right? You're making sure you're not the banana republic that is open to manipulation by other powers. I mean, this is the irony. Democracies have a right to make sure that their freedoms are not weaponized against themselves.
Yes.
Right? We saw that in U.S. elections with Russian interference. We saw also how Europe fought back against that, learning the lessons of 2016 elections in the United States when they had elections in 2017, 2018, etc. So democracies are not supposed to be just, open season, right? There have to be guardrails.
Yes.
So I think that's the key term, right? We need guardrails to make sure that our freedoms are not weaponized at the expense of our national sovereignty.
That's right. And the Foreign Interference Act has been, proven to be effective in many countries across the world. And I think it's about time that we have a similar version in the Philippines.
Let's talk about the other communists here, right? So, of course, the big communist threat for many people is China as far as the West Philippine Sea interests are concerned. Although, personally, I'm sure many would agree with me, I am completely for diplomatic engagement with China, for economic relationship with China, as long as it's not just empty pledge. We're not against that, right? We're just saying we have to be clear about our red lines. We're open to deal with China, but it has to be on terms that we're not being slapped around, right? And I'm sure you agree with it, and I've heard you making also quite a pragmatic, reasonable stance on that. But what is going on with the NPA communist insurgency situation in the Philippines? Because just to be clear, the reason why I'm a little bit confused about this is, on one hand, we heard under the previous administration when you were in the DLG that paubos na sila. That it's implosion, right? Many are surrendering, etc. I talked to many generals back in the day. I think some of them are your colleagues already right now. About how the government is making the right moves by having comprehensive, development-oriented, multi-agency approach, and at the same time, probably this is political already, and you don't have to necessarily engage this. You hear certain people saying, "Oh, we need an ROTC or we need a confidential fund to fight against NPA infiltration en masse." Like, so are they paubos na, or are they still strong? I cannot reconcile the two. What's going on here?
Richard, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
We're seeing the light in terms of armed components, because when you look at the
arm,
yes, because when you look at the CTGs, there's really the above ground and the below ground, and the reason why they have been very successful in the past has been because of this dichotomy, because of this interplay between the red area operations and the white area operations, meaning the above ground, where radicalization takes place, and where the radicalized youth are then transferred to the red areas where they start bearing arms and fight the government.
Right.
And once every now and then they're brought back. So that is the secret in the longevity of the communist terrorist groups in the Philippines. The other reason why they've been there for so long is the lack of a cohesive government strategy prior to the NTF-ELCAC. Before, this was always considered as a military and police problem. Let the military and police take care of it. Now we've learned our lesson. We've expanded the number of agencies that has been part of the National Task Force ELCAC. In fact, all government agencies, departments, are now part of the NTF-ELCAC except for one department. And I think that is the Department of Migrant Workers. I'm not very sure. So we have actually expanded that, and because of that approach, we're able to bring development to the areas that were formerly influenced and now have been cleared by the CTG. So we have this opportunity within our lifetime, to finally put this to an end. Will that mean that the above ground will not attempt to form guerrilla fronts? Of course not. They will, I'm sure, continue to do so until the above-ground organizations finally realize that an armed struggle is not the solution to the problems of the nation.
They're free to push for progressive structural reforms, but not through rebellion, not through threatening the foundations of the Philippine state through violent means. That's what you're saying, right? So you're not against leftist progressives being out there in the Congress, etc. Right?
I think an analogy could be made in the Northern Ireland situation, where they have a political party, the
Sinn Féin,
Sinn Féin, and then the Irish Republican Army, and then the RA, then the entire body politic.
So you're against IRA, but not necessarily. Sinn Féin is free. They have a constituency; they can do what they want. Yeah.
And then they decided as a body politic.
Interesting,
that armed struggle is not going to solve our problems, and that we should pursue a parliamentary struggle moving forward. I think that is the perfect solution to the CTG problem in the Philippines.
Just on end of this point, because I think the last part of this episode I want to talk about Muslim Mindanao and connect it to also what's happening in the Middle East. But let's on this.
So no peace talks anymore.
So no peace talks because you don't feel the need for that.
No, because they've always used peace talks. They've always used peace talks as a means to stop the fighting and then regroup and then recharge. And you will always see that if you look at the history of the communist rebellion or the communist insurgent in the Philippines. Whenever they have problems and pitfalls, they would always ask for peace talks.
It's a tactical rather than a strategic maneuver.
Exactly. They consider peace talks as an extension of the political struggle.
Right, to give them a reprieve and time to recover.
Breathing room.
Right. So, just on this point, to be honest, again, the thing with the task force is that critics would say it's fascistic, it's against leftist progressive groups. It's used for red tagging and all of that. In fairness, my understanding is there have been some changes, to put it mildly.
Yes.
Do you want to say something about that?
I think there has been...
Because things got a little bit crazy not long ago, right?
There has been dramatic changes in the way the NTF-ELCAC has been run as compared to the when it was under the previous administration. NTF-ELCAC also had to evolve with a change in the administration, in the approach and in the philosophy of President Bongbong Marcos. And there was a change in the National Security Advisor as vice chair of the NTF-ELCAC.
Right.
There was a change in the executive director of the NTF-ELCAC. So there has been a significant change, no, in how the NTF-ELCAC did its work as compared to the under the previous administration.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm saying is that even the mayor of my city, Baguio, was red tagged at some point by an ex-member, right? Like, that's a bit crazy. I mean, this is a PMA graduate, police deputy chief guy. So I'm just saying, honestly, for some of us, there was sounding a little bit cuckoo, to be honest, right? So I'm glad that you're reassuring that no, this is a reasonable approach to national security, and we have nothing against parliamentary struggle for progressive reform.
Exactly.
What we're against is treasonous rebellion at the expense of the Philippine State's foundation.
Of course, Richard, we are also against front organizations. The front organizations who are claiming to be above legal and follow the law, but are in truth instruments. Surreptitiously utilizing United Front work for deception purposes. So that is one of the things that
sounds very Maoist China. For a very long time, I mean, you could even argue that the Philippine nation building project is yet to be completed, right? Because a big problem is around 10% of the population are Moro Muslim brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been to Marawi, I've been to Muslim Mindanao, I've talked to our brothers and sisters there, and you know, there's a lot of disaffection. There's a lot of concerns about integration in the Philippine state institutions. I mean, when was the last time we had a Muslim Supreme Court justice or a Muslim senator? I mean, of course, you can say Robin Hood Padilla could be one of them. But having said that, I mean, it's also the conflict in Mindanao, which has really shaped, the thinking of many influential leaders, including former President Duterte. I think many of President Duterte's approach to policy was shaped by the unique experience of Mindanao.
That's right.
For anyone who bothers to really understand Mindanao. Now, so for such a long time, the rebellion in Mindanao really drained the Philippines' military capabilities. And we have a weird situation, not too dissimilar from Indonesia, whereby you're an archipelagic nation, but your army is your biggest component by far of the AFP. Quite, not justifiable given that you need to have bigger navy for a country like ours. We have to be a maritime power. So we're trying to fix that, right? And in fairness, I think to both Aquino and Duterte administration, I mean, in fairness, one of the things that I really appreciate with the previous president was he made, it was a courage of conviction move on the Bangsamoro issue, right? I really appreciated that. And I said that was his finest moment. I was there in Marawi in 2019. I spoke to General Bronner back then, who was the
spokesperson.
Exactly, back then. And he was giving us updates about how situations moving forward. So a lot has changed in the good direction. But what are the still remaining challenges, including reconstruction of Marawi, which is still a big issue from what I understand on the ground? Yeah,
that's right. Well, there has been a lot of good news insofar as Bangsamoro is concerned. You correctly pointed out that it was, the Bangsamoro Organic Law was almost a dead proposition. Because of the Mama Sapano incident.
Yes.
And it was revived by former President Duterte.
He was the only candidate who really stood for it in 2016.
He stood for it and it passed.
Yeah.
Now we're reaping the benefits of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. We have a functioning Bangsamoro Transition Authority, a Bangsamoro Interim Parliament, with well-represented members of parliament coming from both the MILF, and there are some from the MNLF, and there are some from civil society organizations. Now, I know several of them. So this is really an experiment in democracy. I would consider an experiment in democracy because it's a parliamentary system within a unitary presidential system.
Yeah, you should know that.
Yeah.
Something you're a former DLG guy
we've studied before. Yeah. But we're reaping the benefits because Mindanao is relatively peaceful nowadays, no? And the decommissioning process of the normalization of the MILF has been proceeding, no? Of course, there has been some challenges along the way. Yes, but if you look at the numbers of the 40,000 estimated MILF members that are to be normalized.
Meaning reintegrated in the Philippines security apparatus.
Yes. 26,000 have already gone through the process, meaning they've surrendered their firearms, they received a minimum of 100,000 pesos, plus, there's skills training, there's everything. And the normalization process and decommissioning is continuing. I think the latest figure I saw is around 5,000 firearms have been turned over to the Philippine government. And the development of the 6 camps identified by the MILF have already started. So we want to transform these 6 camps into, vibrant communities, because the decommissioned individuals are coming from these camps. So we need to develop them and create opportunities for employment.
Right.
So that they become, self-sustaining communities that will no longer pose a threat to the Philippine government and to the state. Now, that is the role of the BTA, because as everyone knows, all of the commitment under the BOL has been delivered. So in the General Appropriations Act, the lump sum, the block grant has been delivered to the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. So I hope that they will, deliver on their commitment, bring peace and development
and what
in
are
that
our safeguards
area.
to make sure this is not another trapo? You know what I'm saying? I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, this is the word I hear from a lot of young generation moral leaders. Some of them working in the government. They're saying they're worried that this will be treated as piggy bank.
Richard, I'm not an expert on the Bangsamoro, nor am I an expert on development. But on the security side, I know something. And I think on the security side, we're
doing
reaping,
much better.
We're reaping the benefits.
Yeah.
We're reaping the benefits. And now it's up to the leaders, their leaders, the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, plus the local political leaders, to bring development to the Muslim population in Mindanao. I think if we're talking about challenges, the challenges would be the forthcoming 2025 regular elections.
Yeah.
Because then the party of the MILF and the regular politicians, if we may call them that,
Traditional politics,
will come into, it now becomes part of the electoral exercise.
Yeah.
So I think that is a challenge that we have to look at.
So you're keeping an eye on that, right? Because I'm hearing from many people on the ground that's like, let's see, where is this gonna go? Like,
yes,
we're generally happy with the direction of things, but no room for complacency. That's what I tend to get from people on the ground.
And I hope that the results of the election will also show, what is really the voice of the people.
Yeah.
And I hope there will be elected representatives from the MILF, MNLF, so it really becomes a inclusive government.
Yeah, and hopefully,
they can work together.
Incidents of violence and all of that, which tends to be common in Mindanao, unfortunately, we deal with that also accordingly. Last discussion, I mean, obviously the conflict right now in the Middle East is creating almost culture wars in the West, right? So pro-Palestine, pro-Israel groups in the United States, in campuses, on streets. Things are very tense in the West. If I'm not mistaken, the Bangsamoro authorities released also a statement, I think, especially on the ceasefire issue, the need for a humanitarian ceasefire, considering the thousands of children that have been killed in recent weeks. And the Philippine government, obviously, we had Ambassador De Vega in this program to also discuss the Philippine UN vote. I'm just saying, from a national security perspective, are we looking at the potential that there could be some spillovers, meaning some radical groups learning a thing or two about what happened on October 7th, right? I mean, Israel has one of the most sophisticated, supposedly, surveillance systems, and yet that happened, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, you also have this discontent and disaffection about what's happening to their co-religionists, right? Because Muslims talk about ummah, right? This general. How are we looking at that from a national security standpoint?
We've been monitoring Mindanao, and there has been, of course, discontent, but it's mostly to Israel. Okay,
so it doesn't see the Philippine government as being a U.S. puppet supporting blah. Not that kind of thinking,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Yes. There's questions, of course, coming from our Muslim people about how Israel is doing its war on Gaza, because what we see on TV, what we see on social media is pretty disturbing.
Even more for Muslim, because I think
Yes.
the videos we see are like the average mainstream one coming out. I think I was told that among Arab nations and Muslim nations, they're seeing things that even you and I have never seen. We never see. Yeah.
So we're keeping a close watch on this. We're not worried, no, but we have monitored Hamas before. They tried to infiltrate the Philippines twice in the past. No, the most recent one was I was still in the DILG, and there was a certain individual, I just forgot the name, who is a Hamas operative who was talking to local extremist groups in the Philippines. So they wanted to create a presence in the Philippines. I think this was in 2018, just before the pandemic.
Oh, it was after Marawi.
Yes, it was after Marawi. So, but fortunately, we were able to arrest that individual and deport him to Turkey. Okay. So, because of this attempt by Hamas to infiltrate the Philippines, National Security Advisor Eduardo Año has proposed to the Anti-Terrorism Council to declare Hamas as a terrorist organization. So I think that is on the table now. The ATC is discussing that, and we feel there is merit to a proposal to do so.
And you're not worried that because for some Muslims they see Hamas differently, right? They see it as a liberation struggle or resistance group. Although of course we condemn what happened on October 7. I mean, this is really killing civilians. As what happened there has no excuse for it. It's good that you pointed out, because this conversation doesn't come out much, right? But as someone who watches multiple conflicts and tries to see the impact for the Philippines, I just wondered, you're a perfect person to talk to.
I think our position has always been we are against violent extremism because we have our own problems on violent extremism. There was
the Daesh and Maute.
The Daesh and Maute. There was a proposal to, the Marawi crisis was precipitated by a desire to create a wilayat in Marawi, in the same manner that they also wanted to do the same.
A governorate in English, right?
In English. And also in Indonesia. There were also an attempt to do so in Indonesia. No? So, insofar as the NSC is concerned, any attempt to fuel violent extremism in the Philippines is something that we should address immediately. So, in our desire to do this, declaring Hamas as a terrorist organization would help.
And how is the anti-terrorism law that passed during the pandemic time, how is this going to enable the Philippine government to more effectively deal with, like groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, Daesh, which even in the Muslim world are considered as terrorist organizations?
No, we've had some success there. We have declared several individuals involved in the Marawi crisis, involved with Abu Sayyaf, involved with Daesh as terrorist organizations. And once Hamas is also declared a terrorist organization, and if they attempt to infiltrate the Philippines, we would be immediately able to arrest them and detain them for a certain specific period without warrant. There are also other benefits that the law provides, but most importantly, we can immediately cut their source of funding because we can immediately freeze the assets.
The financial legislations and all that.
That's right.
And last point, wow, we covered a lot, no? But thank you so much. That's why I really appreciate you coming along, because I think we need to have this conversation, connecting all of these different elements. And in a way, I hope our audience will appreciate the dynamism that, the dynamism that the National Security Council has. You have to cover so much because Philippines is a global country.
We have a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot. Just last point, I mean, the Marawi operations were very tragic because much of the core of the city, the beautiful core of Marawi, was devastated, and we still have to have reconstruction and deal with that issue and a lot. At the same time, are you feeling more confident that the Philippines is a battle-hardened country when it comes to dealing with terrorism? Right, we have had so much training in counterterrorism since 2001. At least.
That is correct. That is correct.
Very few countries have had that.
Exactly, and in fact, many of our experts, our military officials, who have experience in this are resource persons abroad.
Exactly.
Singapore, in Thailand.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And many of the people who served in Marawi have been invited by foreign universities, think tanks, and foreign counterparts to share their experiences. No, we are. We have experience in preventing and countering violent extremism. We were always being invited by the UN and many other agencies to share our experience.
Worked with many partners with cutting-edge technologies and capabilities, right?
Exactly.
Who are also battle-hardened. Australians, Americans, or their own versions in Mosul, among others.
That's our advantage, no? The experience that we have. We may not have the latest technology or weaponry, but we have the experience to deal with these types of threats.
But hopefully one day we don't even have to have those experiences, right? I mean, that's a tragic thing. I mean,
but we have to be ready all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolving situation. It's an extremely uncertain era. I mean, everyone would claim that their era is the uncertain one, but I'm already seeing multiple conflicts in multiple regions.
But you know, Richard, that because the threat has waned, do we need to stop doing what we're not supposed to be doing? Because through history, before the flavor of the month was the war on terror, right?
Yeah.
And now it's conflicts in Ukraine and everything, and suddenly many countries have shifted their focus from anti-terrorism to focus on other things.
Yeah.
But I think in the Philippines, we should learn that lesson, that there's always a possibility of violent extremism, radicalization in the Philippines. We should continue that.
So essentially, we're juggling multiple things here.
That's right. Yeah.
No envy for your work, but definitely respect for the amount of energy and effort you have to put into it in order to make the Philippines a more secure and prosperous country. Thank you very much, Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya. I really
Professor Richard
enjoyed this conversation and hope we can have you also back on our show. And
I'm surprised I don't have a headache.
No, a while ago you were like complaining you're so tired and your day started. So you were comparing. Mine started like 7 a.m. But you saw it was like a breeze because I'm sure these are issues close to our hearts.
Yes.
And I could see the passion that you're putting into it. And I really appreciate also the honesty and transparency, short of course, spilling operational details. Thank you very much for that, Undersecretary. Catch us again next week here on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. I'm Richard Hidarian, and that was The View from Manila, where One News, all sides, all the time.